Imagine standing on the docks, maybe in Seville or Plymouth, and you're watching these small wooden ships getting ready to head west.
Hmm.
You're not just watching travelers. You're watching a massive gamble, a really high-stakes long-distance trip across a totally unknowable Atlantic.
Right.
You've got the constant threat of storms you can't resupply, but there's also this immense hope of what lies on the other side. This whole era, it just fundamentally rewrote the map of the world.
That imagery is perfect.
Yeah.
The ambition mixed with just sheer physical risk, it
Yeah.
sets the stage so well. We're talking about the moment the world officially shifted from, isolated regions to these interconnected, often competing hemispheres.
Yeah.
This is really where the American story begins.
Absolutely. So today we're doing a deep dive into the European exploration era. Our mission is to understand not just that they sailed, but why they sailed, how they actually managed it, and what those monumental, truly world-changing consequences were.
And we're going to track the foundational motives of Spain, France, and England. And crucially, these weren't just like minor differences in policy.
No.
Their competing national agendas, the very reasons they set sail, determined everything that came after, the communities they built, the land they claimed, and the relationships they formed with indigenous peoples.
Okay, let's unpack this collision of motives then, because exploration wasn't some unified European project. It was, like you said, driven by three completely different operating manuals.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start with the Spanish. They were first and maybe the most aggressive.
The Spanish approach is often summarized by the three Gs: gold, glory, and God. But we really need to look deeper than just the acronyms.
Right.
Gold, sure, that meant immediate extraction of wealth. Glory was about expanding the Spanish crown's territory. But the mission to spread God, specifically Catholicism, was absolutely key.
And that combination of the three goals made their strategy so uniquely focused on conquest, didn't it? Their agents on the ground, the conquistadors, they weren't interested in just setting up little trading posts.
Not at all.
They were actively looking to demolish existing power structures and, I guess, transplant a whole new European system of government and religion.
Precisely. The Spanish didn't seek alliances, they sought subjugation. They viewed indigenous populations as potential converts and, frankly, as a labor source for their gold and silver mines.
So that required a huge military presence from day one.
An immediate military presence and massive centralized control. You can see it in their whole early colonial structure.
Okay, so now contrast that highly militarized, conquest-driven model with the French.
The French had an almost entirely different primary goal.
The fur trade.
The fur trade. And as one economic objective, it just demanded the complete opposite approach to the Spanish. To succeed in the fur trade, they needed reliable access to hunting grounds way inland.
Which meant they had to build partnerships.
They had to. Long-term economic partnerships and alliances with the American Indian groups who actually controlled the supply. You can't conquer your business partners.
So that meant their geographic focus was completely different, too. Instead of building huge, permanent cities on the coast to control territory, the French were pushed into the interior.
Yeah.
They were looking for key waterways, the St. Lawrence, the Mississippi, to set up efficient trade routes back to Europe. It was about mobility, a supply chain, not land ownership.
Exactly. Their whole strategy was alliance, integration, and trade. If they introduced settlers, they were usually agents of that trade network. Trappers, missionaries, diplomats.
Yeah.
Not huge groups of farming families looking to displace anyone.
And then we get to the English. Their motivations were, well, arguably the most foundational for what the United States would eventually become.
Right. The English primary goal was establishing permanent, sustained settlement.
Permanent, that's the key word.
It is. Now, they were definitely seeking economic opportunity, raw materials, new markets, but they were setting up colonies designed for self-sufficiency and long-term habitation from the very start.
I always wondered why the English focus was so much on permanence compared to Spain, which just wanted the gold.
Well, the difference is kind of structural. Spain was extracting wealth for the crown, right? But England was seeking new markets and raw materials to supply a growing consumer economy back home.
So they needed more than just soldiers.
They needed large numbers of laborers, farmers, artisans. They needed sustained population growth in the colonies. And then later, you add in groups seeking religious freedom, and that just further drives the desire for stable, long-lasting towns, not just forts or trading posts.
So to sum it up, Spain, driven by military conquest and extraction. France, focused on flexible trade alliances. And England, aiming for permanent settlement and economic self-sufficiency. 3 profoundly different worldviews, all landing in the same place.
And none of those ambitions, whether it was conquest or trade, could have ever been realized without just a revolution in maritime technology. I mean, how do you solve the biggest engineering problem of the 15th century?
Crossing an ocean that big, surviving storms, and finding your way back.
Exactly.
That brings us to the tools of discovery. We often think of these explorers as just being brave, but they were actually leveraging new, pretty sophisticated technology that dramatically cut down the risk.
Oh, the advancements were critical. Navigation was suddenly systematized. You have the astrolabe, which let mariners figure out their latitude from the sun or stars,
So you know how far north or south you are?
right? Which is vital. And the compass, of course, gave them directional accuracy no matter the weather.
But the real game changer wasn't just the navigation tools, it was the vehicle itself, wasn't it?
Absolutely. The caravel was the technological star of the show. Earlier European ships were often bulky, designed for cargo or coastal travel. The caravel was faster, lighter, more maneuverable.
And its most revolutionary feature was that sail combination.
The combination of square sails for speed and the use of lateen or triangular sails.
Okay, so why are those triangular sails so important?
Because they allowed the ship to tack, to sail effectively against the wind. And that ability transformed ocean travel. It meant ships weren't just hopelessly dependent on the prevailing winds. It made the return journey across the Atlantic reliable, manageable, and most importantly, economically viable.
Without a reliable way back, the whole thing falls apart.
The entire enterprise, yeah, it doesn't work.
And tying all that tech together was better cartography map making that was finally accurate enough to make these incredible distances predictable. So improved tech didn't just make the voyages possible.
Yeah.
It made them a calculated risk worth taking.
And if we look for the single pivot point that guaranteed this sustained European traffic, we have to talk about Christopher Columbus. His 1492 voyage didn't just start something, it ripped the door open.
Right.
It guaranteed that the competing ambitions of Spain, France, and England would soon flood the continent.
That one voyage initiated permanent contact between the hemispheres, and the consequences were just massive and unavoidable. And this is where it gets really impactful, the physical and biological transfer that we call the Columbian Exchange.
The Columbian Exchange wasn't just trade. It was a planetary scale movement of plants, animals, diseases, and cultures between the old world and the new. And this transfer fundamentally changed both sides of the Atlantic.
Often in ways nobody could have seen coming.
Exactly.
Let's focus on the positive transformation for the Old World first. What exactly went back to Europe, Asia, and Africa that changed life there?
Think about corn, potatoes, tomatoes, chili peppers, tobacco. I mean, before the exchange, Italian food had no tomatoes.
It's wild to think about.
Irish food had no potatoes. These new crops, especially the potato and corn, were incredibly calorie-dense and easy to grow in all sorts of climates.
So it wasn't just a culinary change, it was a demographic one.
Precisely. Providing cheap, reliable, calorie-dense food fueled a massive population boom in Europe and Asia. And that, ironically, created the population base that would later supply the labor for colonization.
But the movement into the New World, the Americas, included the most transformative
Yeah.
and most devastating import of all.
That would be the unseen enemy, disease. While the Americas gained animals like horses and cattle, which drastically changed hunting for groups like the Plains Indians, the European introduction of smallpox and measles was apocalyptic.
The indigenous populations had zero natural immunity to any of it.
Zero.
What was the scale of the devastation?
The mortality rates were just horrific. Estimates suggest that somewhere between 70 to 90% of the indigenous population perished in the first century after sustained contact.
90%.
Imagine 90% of the population of your country disappearing in 1 or 2 generations. It completely destabilized societies, it destroyed leadership structures, and left vast territories dramatically depopulated.
Yeah. And that extreme depopulation must have been an unintentional advantage for the European powers. I mean, it made conquest easier for the Spanish, and it even undermined the French strategy of relying on stable trade partners.
Absolutely. The disease environment dictated geopolitics. The French relied on strong, intact indigenous nations for their fur trade, but disease often weakened those partners, which only intensified the competition for the remaining resources and land among all the European powers.
So if we connect all these threads back to the bigger picture, it's clear that this exploration phase, it was never a static period, It was the necessary first step toward permanent settlement and, well, inevitable conflict.
Yeah, the initial claims that Spain, France, and England laid down, all based on those three competing motives, conquest, trade, and settlement, they immediately evolved into competing colonial structures.
Right.
You had Spanish missions and forts dotting the south and west, French trading posts guarding the central waterways, and English towns just slowly expanding along the eastern seaboard.
So exploration really defined the initial conflicts and established the foundational motives that would shape everything that came after, right up to the battles for control of the continent.
That's the key takeaway here. The initial ambitions set the blueprint. Spanish conquest defined the template for how indigenous communities were treated in their sphere of influence. French trade alliances established a lasting tradition of diplomacy and exchange in the middle of the continent. And the English model of permanent settlements, that laid the groundwork for the very colonies that would eventually declare independence.
So, to quickly summarize the journey we took today, European expansion was, unlocked by Columbus, but it was made feasible by tech advances like the Caravel and the astrolabe. And it was driven by those three wildly distinct motives:
Gold, God, and glory for Spain.
the fur trade and alliances for France,
Yep.
and permanent settlements and economic opportunity for England.
And the immediate world-changing result was the Columbian Exchange. This massive transfer of life that brought transformative new foods to the Old World, but brought devastating disease and cultural disruption to the New World. It truly was the starting gun for global history as we know it.
So consider this as you move through your day. How much of the current North American cultural and geopolitical landscape, from, say, the legal traditions of the Southwest to the names of rivers in the Midwest, is still defined by those foundational conflicting motives that were established by Spain, France, and England during that initial dramatic era of contact? That first wave of exploration set a chain reaction in motion, and its consequences are something we are still navigating today,